The story begins in 1996 when a nurse named Charlie Coolant found that his patient was having a seizure. The doctors immediately came to examine him. But unfortunately, the patient had to die.
Back on the chest. Let's get another round of epi, please.
Eight years later, more precisely in 2003, at a hospital called Parkville. The story will focus on a female nurse named Nana Ami who is caring for an elderly patient who is allergic to a certain drug so that her skin peels off, and her husband seems loyal.
This is gonna make her feel better. You want a blanket and pillow?
Yeah.
Ami was also called to her superior's room, who reprimanded Ami for her attitude towards her patients, one of which was allowing the patient's family to stay overnight like her grandmother's husband just now. Indeed, there is no prohibition on the patient's family staying here, but the superior was urged by the hospital board, aka the superior's boss, to save gallons of coffee and other things. And of course, if the patient's family stays here, they will at least drink coffee and so on. This is considered a waste because the rules at this hospital are so strict.
Welcome.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
It's Viv.
Ami, who happened to work the night shift, continued her duties to examine other patients in another room. There he had to turn a patient's body to change medical equipment. However, Ami suddenly felt excruciating pain in her chest, more precisely pain in her heart, which made her immediately go to a quiet room to calm the pain. Ami is a widow with 2 children who has to be the backbone for her young children. Her job as a nurse is very limited, especially since she has to pay someone to look after her children at home when she goes to work.
Bye, Mom. Bye. Have the best day. Love you guys.
And you need some milk, by the way.
When she went to the doctor, it was revealed that Ami was suffering from coronary heart disease, which made her body suffer from severe fatigue and made her heart beat, aka adrenaline. Coronary heart disease is caused by plaque buildup, which causes the coronary arteries to narrow, thereby limiting blood flow to the heart. And that is what makes Ami feel excruciating pain when doing strenuous activities, such as turning the patient's body over last night.
Which could be fatal.
The doctor advised Ami to have surgery, but because Ami's income as a nurse was very limited, there were still many installments. And what's more important is that if the hospital where he works finds out that Amin has a heart problem, he could be fired from his job. Tonight, there happened to be a new nurse who turned out to be Charlie Coolant, who we saw at the beginning of the film. As a good colleague and nurse, Ami also invited Charlie to take a tour, such as entering the medicine storage room, which can be accessed using the nurse code number they have.
The highly original code 4321.
Oh, crackable.
Okay, close the door. Got it?
Yeah.
And the amount.
Not only that, Ami also introduced Charlie to the grandmother she was treating, and also the other patients. While the 2 of them were eating, Charlie kindly offered to get up to take care of the patient. While Charlie was treating another patient, Ami felt chest pain again when she had to turn her patient over again, and when he was alone to relieve his pain. Suddenly, Charlie appeared who was willing to listen to his complaints. Charlie finally knows Ami's true condition, and he promises to keep this condition a secret from everyone in the hospital.
You can do 4 months.
At home, Ami, who was tired and had just come home from work, was immediately greeted by her eldest daughter, who complained about the bottoms of her shoes, which often came off. Ami also asked her children to be patient and wait for payday so they could buy new shoes. That night, when Ami arrived at work, she was quite shocked when she found out that the grandmother she was caring for had died. Not long after the change of ship, when Ami and Charlie were cleaning up the grandmother's body, Charlie told about his experience when his mother died in the hospital. Charlie's mother was left alone by the hospital, just like this grandmother's condition, which Charlie will never forget for the rest of his life. Seven weeks later, two police detectives were seen, namely Richard and Brown. They both received the assignment to investigate the case of the grandmother's death, because according to medical experts, there was something odd about his death, and the Ministry of Health asked the hospital to involve the police in this matter.
Well, nice to meet you all. Okay.
He provided data on what medicines the grandmother had given him, including data on employees who worked at this hospital.
All are listed.
This investigation was quite difficult because the grandmother's body had been cremated, Aka burned to ashes, so Richard and Brown could not carry out an autopsy. So all they can do is check the hospital's data to find out whether there are any irregularities or not.
Well, of course, we'll need to interview all the staff that works in the ICU.
It turned out to be Charlie alias Charles Coolant. When Brown contacted the local police, they informed him that Charlie had been accused of trespassing and battery, but the charges were dropped. And what's interesting is that they found one word in large font and underlined, namely digoxin, which is the name of a type of drug, but I don't know what drug it is.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Charlie and Ami themselves are getting closer day by day, but they don't have a special relationship, they are just friends. But Charlie cares so much not only for Ami, but for Ami's two daughters.
Humdrum Falls.
I am the mayor of Humdrum Falls.
I am the mayor of Humdrum.
While eating in the canteen, all the staff gathered to be told that the police would carry out an investigation, including interviewing all of them. Hospital lawyers also warned staff to maintain patient confidentiality and asked them to answer general questions only.
Hi, Amy. Hi.
When it was Ami's turn to be questioned, Richard immediately asked how close Ami was to Charlie, and whether there was a possibility that Charlie was involved in this case. Linda, the hospital manager, immediately interjected not to rush to conclusions or accuse her staff of being the perpetrators. Linda clearly doesn't want any problems with her employees, which could later damage the image and good name of this hospital.
I don't mean to interrupt. Can I see you for a minute?
When Linda came out, Richard and Brown immediately showed the grandmother's last lab examination data. Ami also found an oddity in the data, namely, administering insulin and digoxin, which should not be given. Insulin is usually used to control blood sugar for diabetes sufferers, but as we know, the grandmother only suffered from an allergy to the drug, not diabetes. When Richard asked whether it was fatal or not, Ami immediately answered yes. It was very fatal and could be called a double medication error.
Sorry.
Thank you, Amy.
That night, Ami experienced chest pain again when she had to perform CPR on a patient who was in critical condition. I can't possibly refuse the doctor's orders because it might raise questions and be suspected by everyone. So after that was finished, Ami immediately went to the back to calm her chest pain. Not long after, Charlie appeared, who suddenly took the medicine from the medicine storage area, more precisely, stole it by taking it and canceling it, so that the computer system will record that the medicine was canceled even though Charlie had already taken the medicine. The medicine that Charlie took was apparently a medicine to relieve the pain that Ami was experiencing. Even though Charlie's actions were illegal and clearly theft, at least it was done to help Ami, who was in pain.
Please don't worry. I'm gonna help you get through this.
Back to Richard and Brown, who have just discovered that Charlie has worked at 9 different hospitals. The two of them immediately contacted the hospitals one by one. However, because the hospital strictly protects the confidentiality of its employees, Richard and Brown did not receive any information about Charlie Coolant.
Whenever they hear his name, no one wants to say anything.
The next day, Richard alone came to see Linda to take the file containing drug withdrawal data from the drug storage room. After Richard looked carefully, the data turned out to be incomplete. Many dates and months had been omitted. Linda explained and reasoned that the equipment in the drug storage room only stored data for 4 weeks, after which it would be automatically deleted. However, from Linda's movements, Richard suspected that Linda had deliberately deleted the data to protect the irregularities in this case so that this hospital would remain good in the eyes of the public. This, of course, immediately made Richard emotional.
I'm not done.
Excuse me.
Sit the fuck down!
As a result, Richard and Brown were banned from entering the hospital because Richard shouted at Linda, the manager. So, this case will be even more difficult to solve with access to investigations, which is now prohibited. Returning to Ami, who happens to be treating a female patient named Kelly, who was involved in a traffic accident and is recovering after previously being in critical condition. There was also her husband named Tom. Tom asked permission to bring the baby here because there was no one to look after him at home.
Messy, Nessie.
Messy, Nessie. You are healing nicely, and you will be holding Vanessa.
Ami and Charlie's relationship is still the same. They are still good friends and good colleagues. Even at home, the children became better and easier to manage, with Charlie frequently visiting and playing with his 2 children.
Beautiful hair.
Okay. It gets better and better. Honestly, the whole thing.
The next night, Ami was shocked by the sudden change in Kelly's condition, which suddenly got worse. Even though just last night he was fine and seemed to be starting to recover. And when Ami checked her lab data, insulin and digoxin were found in her body tissue, which was quite surprising for Ami. And not long after, Kelly was declared dead with the same irregularities as experienced by her grandmother 8 weeks ago. When she arrived home, Ami was visited by Richard and Brown, who asked for some kind of help in investigating Charlie, because Linda had banned the 2 of them from entering the hospital. Ami is the only person who can help with this investigation. Richard openly suspects Charlie of being the perpetrator in the deaths of the patients at the hospital.
Was Cullen with Kelly Anderson?
This has nothing to do with Charlie.
At first, I didn't believe the accusation because Charlie was a good nurse from his attitude and way of working. However, this accusation clearly cannot be ignored because Richard and Brown certainly have strong evidence as to why they suspect Charlie as the perpetrator.
Maybe he's not who you think.
As a result, Ami's attitude towards Charlie began to differ, with one of them refusing to eat together, even though usually they always ate together in the canteen during break times. Intrigued by Richard's accusations, Ami took the initiative to meet her old friend who worked at another hospital, specifically the hospital where Charlie had worked. There, Ami's old friend was immediately shocked when he found out that Charlie was currently working at Ami's place. Because apparently there are many negative rumors about Charlie being responsible for the deaths of many patients. Because insulin and digoxin were found in the infusion fluid, which seemed to be injected in the storage room before being given to the patient.
They found insulin in a dead guy's saline bag. Why did they think it was Charlie?
Ami's old friend and the detectives don't have concrete evidence that Charlie is the culprit, but when Charlie was still working at the hospital, there were about 2 code blues that appeared almost every night. Code blue is a medical term that states an emergency situation that threatens the patient and requires the doctor to intervene to treat the patient. So the doctor must immediately come to treat the patient.
But we used to get codes every night. Sometimes 2 or 3, and then after...
When Charlie was no longer there, the code blue, aka the emergency code, only appeared once a month, so many people were suspicious of Charlie. However, because the hospital was reluctant to tarnish its good name and be reported badly in the media, none of the 9 hospitals investigated this case. So this case was never revealed whether Charlie was the perpetrator or not. And Ami's old friend also doesn't want to prejudice anyone.
You get a lot of codes?
After that, Ami went straight to the room where the 4 fluid bags were stored, and after searching, she found a bag that had a hole in it due to the injection. Ami was really shocked and surprised, which ultimately caused her heart disease to recur and she became unconscious. When she realized that Ami was already on a 4 drip at one of the nearest health centers, and it turned out that Charlie was the person who had helped and brought him here. Because of the overwhelming evidence against Charlie, Ami immediately asked to be sent home. Their Charlie wanted to take Ami home because he was afraid something would happen on the road.
I know.
You sure?
I'm gonna drive her home, make sure she's looked after. Thank you.
Far from being accused, on the contrary, Charlie was really very kind and caring and told Ami to immediately have heart surgery, and the costs will be borne by Charlie. However, Ami, who was extremely suspicious and afraid, didn't pay the slightest attention to his words and went straight into the house without saying thank you.
Call me.
The next day, Ami went straight to Richard and Brown to report that their accusations against Charlie were true. Ami also told how Charlie killed the patient by injecting insulin and digoxin into an bag. So Richard concluded that Charlie was a murderer who could kill without touching.
So he's killing them without ever touching them.
With all this evidence, Ami suggested that Richard immediately arrest Charlie, but apparently the arrest was not that easy to do because stronger evidence was needed than just lab data. Finally, Ami remembered Kelly, who had just died, and suggested the two of them carry out an autopsy on Kelly's body. While waiting for the autopsy results, I was advised to work as usual. That night, Ami saw Charlie changing the 4 fluid bag when Charlie had already left. Ami immediately replaced it with a new one in anticipation of a similar incident. Charlie himself was summoned by Linda and the hospital lawyer. He stated that Charlie was fired from his job just because he wrote the wrong date on his job application. This was just a formality. Linda and the hospital were actually aware of what Charlie had done. But because they didn't want this news to go viral and tarnish the hospital's reputation, the hospital chose to ignore it and try to be safe by firing Charlie.
Firing me for writing the wrong dates on my application.
And this is how Charlie was able to move to 9 different hospitals, get fired, but easily accepted again. Because when the hospital realized that an employee was having problems, they didn't investigate or help with the police investigation. The hospital concerned only thinks about the reputation of its own hospital by giving up and firing employees who are considered problematic. Long story short, night arrived when Ami had just come home from work. She was immediately shocked when she saw Charlie with his children at home. Apart from missing Ami's children, Charlie also wanted to tell them about his dismissal this afternoon. However, instead of showing sympathy, Ami acted coldly by telling Charlie to go home immediately and not to eat at her house because there was little rice left.
Go.
Why is she so angry?
Night.
The next day, Ami, Richard, and Brown carried out or planned a trap so that Charlie would tell the truth. We invite Charlie to lunch in the hope that at the meeting Charlie will confess all his crimes.
Yeah. Saturday works.
But I have to go to work now.
See you later. Bye, man.
When the meeting time came, Charlie looked so happy because he had been accepted into the new hospital, and coincidentally tonight was his first night of work. At first, their conversation was fine until Ami bluntly and openly said about the rumors about Charlie being responsible for the deaths of many patients. Suddenly, Charlie's expression changed and he asked Ami not to discuss this matter.
I don't want to talk about Parkfield. It's
You could explain.
Until now, you two, Richard, Brown, and Ami only had bad prejudice towards Charlie, who was not necessarily the perpetrator. And even if proven true, we don't know what his motives were. But Charlie really doesn't seem to like it when people discuss these rumors, so he immediately leaves Ami to go to work at the new hospital.
He's leaving you guys. He's leaving.
I'm gonna call Ellis.
I pushed him too.
You're under arrest. Get out of the vehicle, slowly. Get down on the ground.
Richard also dared to take the risk by arresting Charlie for 1 times 24 hours for interrogation. If it is later than that time, then Charlie will be released if not proven guilty. So within these 24 hours, Richard must succeed in getting Charlie to admit all his crimes.
Okay, Charlie.
The interrogation session was emotional. Charlie did not want to answer anyone's questions without being accompanied by his attorney. When Richard and Brown continued to urge Charlie, he suddenly burst into tears while shouting that he couldn't answer the question.
Charlie! I can't!
As a result, Ami had to intervene directly to take advantage of his closeness. We build a trust so that Charlie will say something. And in the end, Ami succeeded in getting Charlie to admit all his crimes.
Anna Martina, Douglas Stevenson, Jack, Kelly Anderson.
After naming the victims, Charlie was asked about his motive for committing this crime, which apparently was not based on revenge or personal problems. But Charlie makes a very pointed point that the reason he keeps committing these murders is that no one is stopping him.
They didn't stop me.
To avoid the death penalty, Charles Coulant, also known as Charlie, pleaded guilty to the murder of 29 people, of which the actual victims were believed to be 400 people. Charlie never said clearly what his motive was for killing. It was certain that all the hospitals where he worked had suspicions about him, but no one stopped him. Meanwhile, Ami underwent heart surgery and now lives with her children and grandchildren.